Right, hello and welcome back to the Bus Bot Scottish Football Podcast. I am Hamish. Hello, Calum.
Hello, Hamish. Good to speak to you again. Been a couple of weeks. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm all right. Been a bit of a mixed bag of a weekend, I must admit, but happy to be back to discuss it all.
And we've got Lewis Burrow back to discuss it all. Lewis, what have you been up to in the last 7 or 8 months since we last set our eyes on you?
How you doing, my man? No, not much. Sitting in the house just like the rest of the country. Like Calum, no best of a weekend there. Had just about allowed myself to get Faith back in Motherwell, but nah.
Indeed, right. We're going to touch on all of that. Obviously, worth pointing out that this is now not just in podcast form, but we are now on YouTube, back on YouTube, posting the video of all these various shows that we record. So if you are a fan of the podcast and you are listening to the podcast and you'd like to see three handsome fellas chat about Scottish football, then why not head over to the YouTube? Just search for Bus Bot Scottish Football Podcast and you will see all the episodes that are uploaded in full. So you can, as opposed to maybe being out and listening to the show, you can actually make a bit of an evening of it. You can sit, pour yourself a beer or a spirit, and you can sit and watch three attractive young men. I really need to stop emphasising that point because questions will be asked, but three guys chatting about Scottish football. So that's the service announcement over with. We've got a wee bit of kind of breaking news, guys. About 20 minutes ago, St Mirren have confirmed that manager Jim Goodwin and assistant manager Lee Sharp, not that Lee Sharp, but that did cause a bit of excitement prior to recording. Anyway, those two have signed new 3-year contracts with the clubs, taking them through to the end of the 2023-2024 season. So good news that from a St Mirren point of view, Lewis, and I don't think you can really argue with it because they've had a pretty good season under Jim Goodwin.
Aye, they certainly have. I like Jim Goodwin as a manager since he's come through at Alloa. He's been really good. He's definitely one of the up-and-coming managers in the Scottish and the British game, to be honest. And I think it's a good bit of business for St Mirren tying him down to that contract too, because we're getting to that time of year. Somebody could have made a wee move for him for League One or something in England, that type of thing. So, it's good business for them tying him down. And the summer there, their signings were good. The likes of Marcus Fraser, Richard Tate, it's a lot of solid guys that knew the league. I think St Mirren maybe needed that over the last few years when they've been through sort of Owen Kearney and all that. They did a lot of players in and out, guys that were maybe coming up for England over for Ireland. Were a wee bit untested and stuff, so I think they maybe needed just to sort of solidify a wee bit. They've got good players in that know the league, they know what they're doing, they know their way about, and that's exactly what they've got. They're a really streetwise team, and they're up fighting for that top six. And I think if you'd offered that to any St Mirren fan at the start of the season, they'd have been buzzing with that.
7th at the moment, they've got a couple of games in hand, and Dundee United who are ahead of them. Right, we fast forward 5, 10, 15 years and we look at the careers of Jim Goodwin and Jack Ross, two guys who started off at Alloa, went to St Mirren, and then obviously in Jack Ross's case went on to other clubs. Who, Fisher, is having the better managerial career and how high have they gone?
Oh, that's a big question. I was actually just thinking, obviously, I think we'll probably touch on it, but with the Aberdeen situation, Jim Goodwin could possibly see that as a kind of step up in the summer if they were to go a different direction from Derek McInnes with the job he's done there. I think at the moment, obviously, Jim Goodwin's one of the kind of, I suppose flavour of the month if you want to talk about it in the league, along with probably David Martindale in terms of the job that he's doing, and maybe Jack Ross, even though Hibs have kind of been on a decent run of form lately, maybe not so much. At the moment, though, I've still got to say I still think Jack Ross, because I think after Hibs, I think he is doing a good job at Hibs. I think he's kind of solidified them, in my opinion, this season as the third best team in the league. So I still think Jack Ross at this point in time. But I don't want to take anything away from Jim Goodwin, because I think he's got a really bright future as well. And as I say, it wouldn't surprise me if a certain Mr. McInnes was to depart Pittodrie in the summer, that Goodwin was heavily linked to going there.
I kind of feel like Jack Ross maybe has a higher ceiling, but is he maybe on the way down now after failing at Sunderland? And as much as we want to talk up the Scottish game, I may get completely lambasted for this, but Hibs is a step down from Sunderland, isn't it?
Well, I would say it probably is. In terms of his wage packet and all that, it definitely will be as well. But I don't know, you just get the impression with Jack Ross, he's such a politician type manager, isn't he? Like, clubs will look at that kind of smooth talking kind of way. He fancies himself a bit of Brendan Rodgers as well. Clearly the way he dresses and that. I don't know, you get the impression English football's not seen the last of him. He does want to be the wee quarter zips and the wee padded jackets with the sleeves and that. Aye.
You have to.
I think he had training at Celtic under Brendan Rodgers, I think. Or he certainly went and got involved there, so there maybe is something to that.
You have to take into account as well that Sunderland have been a bit of a disaster of a club, obviously well documented in the 2 seasons on
Quite
Netflix.
But
so that probably works in his favour as well, the fact that he can point to that and say that it was a bit of a shambles. And obviously if he continues to do well with Hibs, then I think there's every chance he might get a chance back in England, or potentially at your club, Hamish. Who knows?
So your official prediction is that when all is said and done in the world, that Jack Ross will have had a better career than Jim Goodwin?
I'll put my neck on the line and say yes, but I genuinely do rate Jim Goodwin. And he seems like a nice guy as well, to be fair to him. Jim Goodwin.
Without going all ITK in that, he genuinely is one of the nicest guys. I'll tell you a quick story. It's not a particularly funny story or anything, but there was a game a few years ago, Ayr-Alloa. I think Ayr won 4 or 5-0 against Alloa. It was a midweek game. The daft press at Ayr went and did his post-match interview while I was still doing some work for a radio station, and he was good enough, Jim Goodwin, to redo his full interview just for me. Ian McCall, let's just say, didn't afford me the same courtesy, and that was after Ayr had won that game. I think it was 4 or even 5-0, and he was a class act. I really, really like him, but he's weird because he was such a horrible player as well. Like he's one of those guys that you would not think he'd be a nice guy. If we get any more candidates for people who were absolute bastards on the pitch but are actually quite nice, I'm trying to think.
I think there's quite a lot like that, because I mean, guys that are like that on the pitch, it's generally, they can still be good in that, they can still affect the team, but it's generally because they're kind of limited a wee bit, and maybe because they're a bit more limited, they've got to see the tactical side of the game more, and they're all about kind of making themselves better and progressing and that sort of stuff. So I think the guys are quite often like more adept at becoming managers, like because they're a bit more in tune with the tactical side of the game. I think anyway, might be shite, but
got a cracker, and he played for your club as well as mine. Striker,
me,
horrible player, lovely off the pitch.
Owen Coyle, no, fuck, he didn't play himself, did he? Tommy Coyne, Scott McDonald. That the one?
Lovely guy, but absolutely horrible player. Fish, have you got any from maybe the Rangers side or
I suppose the kind of reputation that Kevin Thomson had at Rangers was that obviously kind of the thing you see before Old Firm games and that, you always see the clip of him smashing into Robbie Keane twice in that game at Ibrox. But having met him at another podcast's live show, he was very pleasant and very nice. And actually, he's been the co-commentator in RTV for, I think, pretty much every game this season. And don't get me wrong, he's not got the most exciting voice, but he does explain things very, very well, because he's now obviously a coach from that perspective. So that was kind of the first one that's sprung. Well, actually, the first name when you said that that's sprung to my mind was Ian Black, but by all accounts, he's just as much a dick off the park as he is on the park. So, I'll go with Kevin Thomson on that one, I think.
Stuart McCall sprung to my mind. Like, it wasn't necessarily a hot Stuart McCall. He wasn't necessarily a horrible player, but he was a hard player. Then he's a cracking guy. You hear him get interviewed and that.
And inversely, are there any? Can you be a nice person on the pitch and then a complete wanker off it? Is that a thing? Why don't we just go for wankers off the park?
Wankers off the park. Well, I mean, we could be here all day. I suppose it depends on your persuasion, doesn't it? As well. Then we could get ourselves into trouble and get kicked off Zencaster forever.
Right, okay, in that case we'll move on, but good news for St Mirren there, and time will tell where Jim Goodwin ends up, whether his long-term view is to manage in Scotland or whether he wants to go south of the border. Time will tell. Right, we had an interesting question that came in from Dylan McDonald. Dylan McDonald of the Talking Boz Lower League podcast, which, as I've said numerous times in this show before, is your best podcast with regards to Scottish Lower League football. Dylan got in touch with us and asked, are any players playing abroad that you would potentially pick for the Scotland squad in the summer? Ryan Gauld might be the obvious shout, but Liam Henderson and David Bates playing well. Too late for a call-up for Stephen Colker. So we were kind of struggling for some names initially, guys, and then we threw it open to the Burst Ball group chat. And we've had quite a few. In fact, Casey's just sent in a big list of, right, Jay Hallsgrove, I think it's Jordan Hallsgrove from a Football Manager playing. He's at Celta Vigo. You've got Jack Harper, who's with Villarreal's second team. In Italy, you've got Aaron Hickey, Liam Henderson, and Harvey Sinclair.
Yeah.
Harvey Sinclair? Yeah.
Yeah.
France, you've got
Chelsea.
T. Garnier from France.
But he's Scottish.
Netherlands, Lewis Fiorini. Frank Ross.
Yeah.
S. Calderwood. Is that
Jimmy?
Some of these sound like Pro Evo regens.
And then there's C. Summers, who is that Kieran Summers, who was at Stenhousemuir in Queen's Park and the like. None of them are getting near the Scotland team, but if we kind of go to more familiar names, the ones we had chucked out, I mean, the obvious one for me was Ryan Gauld. I think he's been one of the best players in Portugal this season. I don't pretend to be an expert in the Portuguese league, but I think he's had 3 or 4 man of the match awards, which is, I think, as much as anyone else. And I know Braga were linked with him last month, and they're chasing the title in Portugal. He's out of contract at the end of the season. He's currently playing for Firenze, so he could be an outside shout, but he's probably trying to get into the hardest part of the team, isn't he? A part of the team that's so strong. Lewis, have you got any other names that you think could force their way in?
No, not. What do you mean, like foreign players?
Well, they are Scottish. Yeah.
Aye, but players that are playing abroad. No, I don't know any other players that play abroad, mate. That list has exhausted me. But I suppose you've got like Johnny Russell and stuff plays over in America. And I know that you've heard like Alex McLeish always used to speak about how he would walk coals to come and play for Scotland, especially in like friendlies and that, despite the fact he's got an absolutely gargantuan journey back to play for us. So if like Sam, he'll be in and about contention for places, you think, as well, at Kansas City, I think. Gauld, as you say, very, very hard position of the pitch. Same as Russell, actually. Hard position of the pitch to try and get in it. But you would imagine he'll be in the shout, aye.
Jack Hendry, for me, could be a shout. Aye. He's having quite a good time of it with Ostend in Belgium. Whether he's good enough to play for Scotland, he's obviously had caps in the past, but unlike Gauld, he'd be coming into a part of the team where we're not really strong. I mean, I was about to call Declan Gallagher Dermot Gallagher there, but Declan Gallagher is, a guy who's played some games recently, but I'm yet to be, as good as he's been, and I can see Lewis already giving me daggers, I'm yet to be totally convinced that Declan Gallagher can play a major championship as Scotland's main centre-back.
Well, he's not been great for us since they went and qualified. When he came back, he's really not been in good form. He's out at the moment with a muscle injury, but obviously there's a lot of speculation surrounding his future and that as well, and Celtic are linked to him and stuff, so he's not necessarily getting an easy time out off the fans as well. But nah, I wouldn't say he'd been in great form for us, especially in the latter months of Robinson's reign there. Alexander, as a unit, had maybe made us a wee bit better, and he fitted into that, but I agree with you. I don't think we can go as a nation into the Euros. I think he'll win the squad, definitely. I mean, he's been a key part of the campaign, but I don't think we can realistically go into the Euros like absolutely pinning our hopes in Declan Gallagher being our main centre-back, like no chance. I think people like Jack Hendry, especially having gone abroad into a really strong league, done well against all the odds, he's got a point to prove as well, which is always important for a player. And I think you've got to have others in the conversation too. Same with right back.
Any names, Fisher?
Well, I was always a big fan of David Bates when he was at Rangers, to the point where I think I had several heated discussions with a few people on nights out, bizarrely enough, over David Bates being good enough to play for Rangers and for Scotland. I suppose centre-half's maybe one of the areas where we're not as strong. Certainly you would think that maybe Aaron Hickey would have a chance of just making the squad, but he's never going to play. I probably agree with you, Hamish. I think Gould's maybe the best shout out of all those names. I mean, I think from one thing that we've seen from Steve Clarke's squads is that there's a core group there that are going to be there unless there's obviously a significant injury crisis. So it is going to be very hard for these players to break their way in. But yeah, I think Ryan Gauld, as you say, is probably the best option there. That's the only one I can maybe see coming in, but not too hopeful for the rest of them, to be honest.
How are we feeling about the whole Euro situation then? Because from all the euphoria and the song that I've now forgotten what it's called, someone...
Yeah, I Can Boogie.
Right,
How could I forget that? But that's the point I'm making. Things have gone very quiet, and I know that's because there's been no international fixtures for months, and I know that the next one isn't until I think next month. But have we thought much about the Euros, Fisher?
Not particularly. I mean, obviously with my own kind of club situation, if you like, it's been very much focused on looking forward to us hopefully winning the league. But I don't know. I mean, there's been all the talk as well that it might be getting moved to one particular country, or what's got it might not even happen. I think, particularly with circumstances are at the moment, it's difficult to get excited about. It sounds really depressing, but anything until it actually happens, kind of thing. So, but I'm sure once the domestic season gets out of the way, and if the Euros hopefully do go ahead, that excitement and anticipation will start to build up again. I mean, I suppose we'll all know for ourselves, like as soon as we beat Serbia, I mean, the amount of people that had booked to go to London, it's almost as if everybody you knew had tried to get a hotel or had text saying they're going down. So I'm sure when the end of the season comes, and hopefully with that, as we move into the summer months, the lifting of some restrictions, people will start to get excited again. I hope so anyway, because it feels like it's been, I know it'll be 3 years since the World Cup, but it feels so long since we've had like a major tournament to watch, let alone obviously having Scotland in one.
Yeah. Right, I'm surprised you even showed your face, Fisher, because your team have sadly shamed the nation. Sadly shamed the nation. Rangers have launched an internal investigation after police broke up a party in Glasgow in the early hours of Sunday morning. Rangers, I think, put out a really short statement saying Rangers are aware of an alleged incident which is subject to an internal investigation. We will make no further comment. Police Scotland say they received a report of a gathering at a property in Hayburn Lane in Glasgow around 1:10 a.m. on Sunday morning. Officers attended and those in attendance left. 10 people were issued with fixed penalty notices for breaching coronavirus regulations. What has the reaction been on Rangers news to this?
I think, as you can imagine, because there was kind of rumours yesterday morning if something had happened, and there wasn't anything concrete. It kind of came out, and then it breaks last night, and I think a lot of people are just obviously really disappointed. I mean, 4 games away from winning the league, hopefully. I keep adding that caveat in there. And these players have decided to pretty much, I mean, they just jeopardise the fact that they'll be involved, first of all, but then potentially, the kind of, I don't think there'll be any gloss taken off Rangers winning the title, but it's just like, it's just bad PR that the club doesn't really need at the moment. It's been a tough week for Scottish football clubs in general, as we all know, and some of the stuff that came out last week. So for that to happen, I mean, I mentioned at the start of the show, I had a bit of an up and down weekend. Like, it started well with Rangers winning, and then I know it's a taboo subject on here, but Scotland didn't win at the rugby, and then finally getting over that, and then this breaks last night, and you're just like, I mean, I don't want to say thankfully, but the players involved, or the alleged players involved, appear to be kind of fringe and youth players, which I suppose is a positive, if you want to put it like that. But just disappointing, particularly as well. You've seen what happened with Jordan Jones and George Edmondson. I mean, they get suspended for 7 games. They were fined and they were out the door in January, albeit on loan, and they did appear on the bench, I think, once or twice before they left. But I mean, you would have to imagine, I mean, you can't get a bigger example of what's going to happen to you than that. So yeah, just disappointing, and obviously don't want to go into the kind of alleged names involved, but a couple there, I think, within the Rangers support that there was a lot of high hopes for and a lot of excitement about, particularly if we were to wrap the title up in the next couple of weeks, that they might get more game time, as we maybe shift the focus towards, hopefully, if we're still in Europe at that point. So yeah, just disappointing. I mean, I know, as you can imagine, there's a lot of folk going straight to, just sack them, get them out the door. That's completely unrealistic. Well, not unfortunately, but it's a completely unrealistic thing for any kind of employer to do. So just need to see what comes of it. It's frustrating that obviously it's my club at this point, but just that, again, we're talking about football and the breaches and just the negative press that obviously comes with that.
Yeah, I want to trade quite carefully with the next little bit because I don't want to lose any more fans of the podcast. But Has the Scottish First Minister had anything to say about this latest breach? Has anyone seen any comments, or has she been kind of quiet on the issue?
So I think obviously the updates I'm just kind of looking at the clock there, has just been on, and I think the first couple of questions that she was asked were in relation to this, which obviously for some reason annoyed people, because I mean, why would you be asking questions if you're the media about one of the biggest clubs in the country? But I think she was quite fair. I think she alluded to the fact that it's obviously Rangers' issue to deal with because there's still an investigation ongoing, and I think she kind of made mention that she's probably fed up of speaking about football in this regard, which I can understand, given the fact that they're looking at trying to get schools back shortly, and there's probably 1,000,001 things that they need to be discussing or concentrating on rather than football. So I think from what I've seen, she was quite fair. Other than obviously, I mean, you know what it's like on Twitter and stuff like that. Folk are always going to be annoyed about something, and there was the usual, I can't believe the BBC, this is the first question they're asking kind of stuff. So, but I think all in all, she was quite fair with her comments, and just kind of left it for Rangers to investigate and then go from there.
You're quite a big fan of the SNP borough, aren't you? So, I mean, what's your take on this whole situation?
I love them. No, I don't. I can agree with Fisher. Like, I don't think it's something that ideally we want the politicians to be worrying about. Like, I mean, there's always just that worry as well. As I think, to be honest, if they totally had the way they would just do, where they get fed up with football and just like pull the rug out from under it, you know, which we all really don't want to see. But no, Rangers, I think they set a precedent the last time, and it was a strong precedent, as Fisher says. And fair ask to them. I mean, that's what needed done. So I think I would expect to see similar this time for the players involved, if it's proven that they have been involved, of course. And just not nice to see, but you know, happens.
We'll move on. Celtic, a couple more statements put out today. One, the interim financial results, and then a subsequent statement to the supporters from Ian Bankier that said a lot but didn't really say anything. It sounds like Celtic's so-called New Year review is still ongoing. There's been no progress there. The club still don't know what to do. Neil Lennon will be staying in charge, although that wasn't even mentioned. It was just kind of assumed that Neil Lennon would be staying in charge for the foreseeable future. And kind of all I've got to say about it, lads. Obviously, anyone listening to this that really wants to hear more or read more about it can go on to the Celtic website and listen to it. I've done loads of videos on it for my real job today, and I'm pissed off with the whole situation, but not as pissed off as I was a few months ago. Right, moving on. Motherwell humped again. In similar tone to Fisher, I'm surprised that you've shown your face in this podcast after yet another humping by Hamilton Accies. 4-1. Your manager was sent off as well. He got the 2 yellow cards. Clearly, he did quite a lot wrong on Saturday, and he made some interesting comments after the game as well. He was saying that he got the team wrong. He took a bit of responsibility for it. What's the initial thoughts in Motherwell with regards to Graham Alexander and how he started at the club?
Well, the initial thoughts are pretty positive, to be honest. I mean, we were spiralling under Robinson. We were really, really poor. And I think when that happened and he left, I think a lot of people thought, like people are saying Aberdeen, I think people are maybe thinking, they're a wee bit hasty to do that. But we weren't. I mean, it was getting worse every week. And as he said himself, he wasn't getting a response out of the team. Now, I mean, if you look back to last summer, when we brought this squad together, we just finished third in the league. And the additions that people made, people were expecting us to go on and have another right good season. Like if you actually pick through the players individually, it's a decent squad. Loaded squad now, but a good squad. So yeah, and Alexander came in. It's been kind of back to basics football a wee bit. He's made us hard to beat. We're a team that people won't like to play against, rather than a team that carry loads of threat. But we have managed to score more goals in opposition simply, which is how you're going to win games. So since he came in, it has been positive. We've had home beat Dundee United at home. Down to Kilmarnock and one had a drop Paisley in his opening game. It has been good. We've solidified. We've pulled ourselves away a wee bit. But I think especially getting down to Kilmarnock during the week, and with it being as scrappy a game as it was, that's the game that we've been losing 2-0 all season. Nothing in it. Both teams are kind of stinking. But then 75 minutes they'd score and then they score at the end and we come away with a 2-0 defeat. Whereas we actually went and won it, like we did to Kilmarnock, what's been done to us. And I think, myself included, I think people maybe started getting a wee bit carried away with us and what we had done. and including the players, I don't know if they maybe started to think they were a bit of a team as well. I'm not sure, but Hamilton, Accies, and Saturday, they just never turned up at all. Hamilton came as they always do well in the Lanarkshire derbies. They really pressed us. That's just they're a pressing team, aren't they? So they came and did it, and we like to play the ball out for the back under Alexander. I like to push the fullback, push the centre halves out wide and push the fullbacks up and all that. Give ourselves kind of short and long options for the back, but they were all over us like a rash. Bruce Anderson, Rock Poe up front, stayed high, stayed on the centre halves. They've not had enough good games together yet to be rock solid, so they look shaky for the start as well. And we just carried no goal threat. Once the second goal went in, as Robinson used to say, it was as if the players then looked for an excuse to be bad after the second goal went in, rather than just kind of rallying and getting back into it. It's really disappointing because Accies have got the better of us now. I
was going to say that they've got 23 points this season, Accies, and 9 of them have come against Motherwell, almost half of their tally. It was their first win, Accies, I think, in 7 or 8 games since the 2nd of January when they beat a team 3-0, and there's no prizes for guessing who that team were. It's quite a run. They've beaten you 3 times this season. They've won their last 3 at Fir Park. What's going on?
Well, they love these derbies, and it's clear they do. And you see it, even in Saturday there, when Hamilton were 3-0 up within half an hour, there was a few minutes to go at half time. There was a player down for treatment, and Brian Rice had the Hamilton players all over. They were in a huddle at the touchline and was batting out the struck. You would think they were 3-0 down. Like it was, discussions going on. And we were just, I think Alexander was trying to give them the kind of, I'm not looking at you sort of treatment, trying to provoke a response. But you look at them, it was the intensity of them. It's like they love these games, and they really rise to them. I think we're no great shakes, but I think maybe traditionally we're expected to go and beat Hamilton, and I think sometimes we go out thinking, we're in a decent run of form, we've got this Lanarkshire derby, we will beat them. But as you know yourself, even like the old firm and that, derbies are different. There's just a whole different kind of outlook brought into it. But I think Hamilton have always got in as a traditional underdog in the Lanarkshire derby, and it really suits them. They're always so, even although they're not always in great runs of form, they're generally not in the players, nor have they been recently, Rangers aside. They just go into it as a gang, and they've got a great underdog mentality, and they always rise to the occasion, whereas it's always a game that we're caught a wee bit cold in, I think.
Like we can shift the kind of fear that we've got from Hamilton to Ross County, probably. Now, they didn't play at the weekend, but they are now bottom of the league after Hamilton's win, Fisher. When you look around them, you're starting to run out of teams that they could finish ahead of. Hamilton's an obvious one, but Kelly, I kind of feel under Tommy Wright, will get themselves out of that. I mean, I don't know. Time will tell. That could be wrong. I feel like Motherwell under Alexander in general will do enough. Certainly the 2 Saints are more than good enough, and Dundee United now are 11 points off the bottom. So that's a lot of points to make up in 9 or 10 games. So are we looking at Hamilton and Ross County now as the 2 that are going to be occupying those bottom 2 spots?
You would have to imagine so. I mean, I know Casey again in the group chat at the weekend was pretty resigned to Kilmarnock's fate. I think he was placing a lot of blame at Motherwell on Saturday in particular. But yeah, I mean Ross County and Hamilton are the 2 sides that have probably over the piece, got the 2, the poorest squads. I did think at the very start of the season that somebody like St Johnstone would get dragged in there, but to be fair, they've pushed themselves clear a wee bit. And the thing with Ross County as well, obviously Hamilton have got 2 games in hand against Kilmarnock, who are above them, and a couple of games in hand on Motherwell, St Johnstone, whereas Ross County have got 1 game in hand over Kilmarnock. And then other than that, there's not really any teams they've got games in hand over that would make too much of a difference. So yeah, I think County, they kind of got a little bit of a bounce to begin with when John Hughes came in, but I always thought from the start that to try and keep them in the league, that maybe wasn't the best appointment. And so I think for me, definitely County. Hamilton seem to be doing their regular Great Escape attempt, so it'll be interesting to see if they can pull that off again. But yeah, a long answer to your question, Hamish, but I would agree that County and Hamilton will be the 2 there at the end of the season.
All I'll say is though, on as a predicting Hamilton to get down, is it's hard not to do. Do you actually picture next season Celtic Rangers? Do you actually picture not going there at 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon? Because I don't picture them not in this league. I'll be honest.
Yeah, there's 2 spots, aren't there? They could finish second bottom and make it out of the playoffs. Who are we looking at? Who are we looking
Dunfermline,
at the
probably.
moment in terms of Championship? Dunfermline, Inverness, that kind of thing. We get a Highland Derby, maybe.
If the Championship gets finished.
Dundee are in there as
Never
well, somehow. But I don't think they're going to be, good enough to get up to the top flight.
See, it's a weird thing you saying that, though, because I cannot imagine a top flight, probably because I've never seen it. I can't imagine Kilmarnock going down just because I've never seen Kilmarnock out with the top flight. So, and the same with Motherwell, actually, to be fair, your team, Burrow. So, I don't know.
Then again, you probably couldn't have seen Rangers going out of the top league, could you?
I know, and I saw plenty of that, so we'll move on for there, I think.
You're just asking to get more TikToks made about you, aren't you?
What was Alan Burrows saying? What's this carry on, Lewis?
I saw he was in the back page of a lot of the papers yesterday, kind of pleading for the Scottish Cup still to go ahead, which is, interesting because he was talking about obviously we're getting more places in Europe next year, and correct me if I'm wrong, you'll know, but I think the winner of this season's Scottish Cup would get a Europa League playoff place. Is that right? Which is a massive incentive, obviously. That's one win and you could enter the lottery of the Europa League group stages. It's been massive for any team outside Celtic or Rangers. So see his point, absolutely see his point. I would love it to be us. You would get, aside from the glory of winning a cup, you'd have an absolute, probably a big glamour tie, and if you were to somehow sneak through it, you're into those group stages. But at the same time, I just can't help but feel there's no feasible way for the Scottish Cup to start this season. You look at the fixtures that would be next up, you're the third round in it, and you've got like Annan going to Fort Martin and a lot of fixtures like that, and these teams haven't played since mid-December, December, and they've got no plans for them coming back to their league matches anytime soon. So I think it's unfair. I don't see how you can then expect these teams to go and contest the early rounds of cups, and they just can't.
Third qualifying round, they would go into the cup winner, so that'd be 2 rounds they'd have to win to make the group stage. From the following season, they would go into the playoff round. So next season, the league winners will go into the Champions League Champions route, third qualifying round. Second place will go into the Champions League route, second qualifying round. If you're still with me, the third place team will go into the Conference League, second qualifying round. And fourth place will do the same, although if the Scottish Cup isn't played or if it's won by a team that's already qualified through the league, then it'll go to fifth place, I believe, and third place will get the Europa League spot. So, I did a kind of full video on it last week from Celtic's point of view, but it's just so confusing next year because you've got this new Conference League that's going to be mainly for the smaller nations, but there's still going to be some decent sides in there. I think the English League Cup winners go into it, and teams for Germany and Spain, I think 7th place in those leagues will go into it as well. So it's going to be interesting anyway. In terms of the Scottish Cup, we had a bit of a debate in the group chat, didn't we? Some people certainly seem to think that it would still be played. Some people didn't. I'm of the latter persuasion. I just think they were running out of time a little bit. I think if the Euros is going to be played in its usual way, UEFA need Hampden back by start of May, I think. For some reason, they need to do whatever they do at the stadium. So you're kind of running out of time a little bit to play all these rounds. One idea I did float in the group chat was the potential similar UEFA type thing that UEFA did with the Champions League and the Europa League last year, with the 8 teams in the same venue or split over 2 venues. Can we see something similar with the Scottish Cup? The last 8 into a week-long Super Cup, every game played at Hampden back to back.
That idea sounds far too out of the box for Scottish football, to be honest, mate. So what happened when we tried to get 2 games on at one stadium in one day, and all hell broke loose, mate. So but I did enjoy that. That was like the most I had probably enjoyed the Champions League and stuff like that for quite a while, just because it was. That was kind of just as we were coming out of the first lockdown, I suppose, as well, which helped. But like the fact that it was just game after game after game, as if it was like an international tournament type setup. So I would certainly be open to that, but again, it's just timing, and particularly with Rangers and Celtic, if players are going away to the Euros and then you're playing with depleted squads and stuff like that, I don't know if the clubs would agree to it.
I think as much as we would like to see it go ahead, I think if we're going to get the Betfred Cup done, hopefully we're going to get a Premiership and Championship done. I really feel that we should maybe just be cutting more losses with that one this year anyway.
I don't know.
Especially when there's no fans there. I mean, the whole argument for playing the tournament last year or to finish last year's tournament was that they were hoping to get fans in. Obviously, that didn't happen anyway, but you kind of feel like I don't think anyone would be too gutted. It's not as if anyone is going for a treble or anything like that, so there's no one's going to be really gutted about missing out on that final piece, and it's not as if teams have come through rounds. I don't know is there any wee tiny teams that have put out huge clubs? I mean, that might be a bit harsh on them, and teams like I think Celtic have got Falkirk or Arbroath in the next round. Rangers have got Cove. So teams like that may be a bit disappointed, but again, there's no
gate.
They're not going to get the big gate anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I suppose, could you even hold back, just stop the tournament now and play it next season as it is?
With the same draw.
And just play the same draw, because then no one's really worse off. I suppose there'll be some teams missing out next season completely, but hey-ho, it's interesting. Final thing I just wanted to touch on at the end of the show was an interesting thing that I read with regards to Stenhousemuir. They have established an analysis department at the club. On the website, they say Stenhousemuir is pleased to announce the formation of its first analysis department. A key part of the club's football strategy is the establishment of an analysis department for performance and recruitment requirements. It goes on to say the performance analysis team will focus on preparation for the next game by supplying key statistical data, bespoke illustrations and graphics, and match footage to the management team and the players. The recruitment team will be charged with the responsibility of supporting talent identification, using statistical data and footage for comparison and review to aid the decision-making process with regards to recruitment. It's interesting that a club in the lower reaches of Scottish football seem to be making moves like this, and it's obviously a pretty big deal if Stenhousemuir have decided to take to their website to do it. Do we think in general in Scotland that we pay enough attention to analysis of football, or are we streets behind what goes on in other nations, Lewis?
No, I think you need to pay attention to it. It's the way the game's going. It's very scientific, and I think in our Premiership, I would imagine that our teams in the Scottish Premiership buy into it every bit as much as a lot of your teams in the top leagues abroad. To be honest, I think it's a huge part of the professional game, but it's good to see that clubs lower in the leagues are buying into it as well, but maybe not just quite in the same level. But it's just good to see. I think just because we want the country's game to drive forward, so to go that way, you need all the clubs to come with it, and you need standards to be raised everywhere. So Steny are a very, very ambitious club for League 2. I mean, you look at some of the signings this summer, even some of the boys they brought in from other League 2 teams you didn't think they would get, spent a bit of money, just like Stirling Albion, teams like that. I think a few of them have just maybe used COVID to kind of refresh things and start trying to kick on a wee bit. So no, to see them do it is good, and if it gets better talent into them, makes League 2 of a higher standard, then pushes League 1 to a higher standard championship, just makes the country's game stronger. So it's definitely the way forward.
Any thoughts, Fisher?
Well, it's just good to see. I agree with kind of what Birrell was saying there. It's something that obviously my own club at Rangers has vastly improved since Steven Gerrard came in. Like, it just didn't exist pretty much until he came in, and I think from a fan's perspective, that's been great to see. So the more clubs that do it and have the capacity and the ability to do it means that the standard of the players that they bring in, the players that they develop, is going to get better. And obviously if that is widespread across the lower leagues right up to the Premiership, then hopefully that means only the game in general can get better, which would be brilliant. And I think that's probably what we're all hoping for.
Yeah, definitely. Rangers have come on to a much better level with that side of things. Celtic were at a better level when Brendan Rodgers came in, but my worry is that these are all external appointments that have come in and raised the standards. And I mean, I don't claim to know a great deal about what goes on at other Premiership clubs or even further down the food chain, but it does seem sometimes like we are a bit behind England, and not just England, but we're a bit behind other nations that we should be competing with in the European stage. Countries like Belgium, I think are streets ahead of us with this kind of thing. So good move from Stenhousemuir. Final thing I've got to mention, just because Matt would probably not be very happy if we didn't, but there's a bit of a fiery reaction towards the Aberdeen chairman, Dave Cormack, after a Q&A that had been planned was cancelled. Now, I say cancelled. Dave Cormack did tweet out saying that the live Q&A has been postponed and not cancelled. The risk of Q&A content being taken out of context, resulting in distracting media headlines, is something we'd all want to avoid on the day of the Celtic game. Sincere apologies for the late notice. We will reschedule the live Q&A event shortly. So it seems like not all is well at Aberdeen. They dropped points at the weekend to St Mirren as well. Big questions for me over Derek McInnes. We touched on that in the last podcast, but I'm sure that's one that's going to keep ticking along. It's been good to have you on, lads. I appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for listening to this podcast or watching this podcast. Thanks if you sent us in any questions on Twitter. We are at Burstball Podcast. Give us a follow there and we'll speak to you very soon.